What's going on, everyone? Taylor Kyles here for CLNS Media, coming at you with another episode of Pat's Daily, brought to you by our good friends at Prize Picks and Game Time. Today, we're continuing our look at the Patriots draft class, trying to get some more perspectives on how the Patriots did and how these guys could potentially contribute. And today, I've got one of my good buddies, Jarrett Bailey here of USA Today, A to Z Sports, deputy editor of Behind the Steel Curtain and host of the Pump Fake Believe Network. Man, you are a pretty busy fella. Jarrett, thank you so much for stopping by, buddy. How you doing? And welcome to the show.
Oh, man, I appreciate you having me. You just hopped on the Pump Fake last week talking about the AFC East. So, yeah, it's good to run it back on your channel talking about some Patriot stuff. So appreciate the invite.
Hell yeah, brother. All right. So I don't expect you to have like a complete knowledge of the Patriots draft class. Like you got a little deep in the weeds, especially with some of those offensive line picks. So we'll really stick with the Patriots offensive weapons in this podcast. Drake Maye, Jalen Polk, and Javon Baker, three guys who I really do think we'll see about Drake Maye. I'm curious your thoughts there, but the receivers I feel like are guys who can contribute pretty early. So before we get into each of these guys specifically, from an overall standpoint, how did you feel about the additions New England made after saying they were going to weaponize the offense, but then having kind of a quiet free agency as it came to, going outside of the organization and bringing guys in?
Yeah, I mean, it's as a Patriots fan, if you are a Patriots fan, I'm a Steelers fan, but from the outside looking in, like it's very clear that they have a proof of concept in mind, a vision in mind of what they want to do, and that's this is year one of a brand new era with Gerard Mayo in charge, Elliott Wolf being the general manager of sorts, and a new offense with Alex Van Pelt. And you brought up prioritizing, bringing in more weapons offensively. They did that by bringing in two guys in the draft and Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, as well as Drake Maye. So I think that they recognize that, okay, this is year one. Let's lay this foundation. Let's set, our new quarterback up for success with two guys who are, going to ride this wave with him for, the foreseeable future. Because going into the offseason, I mean, there wasn't too many weapons that they had offensively. Pop Douglas had his moments and whatnot. Juju Smith-Schuster is fine. But they didn't really have any, guys who can stretch the field, who can, be looked at as potential, legit number one weapons or legit downfield weapons. So I love how they addressed the draft. I really, like how they've addressed this offseason overall. I did my game by game picks. I do two of those a year, one the night of the schedule release and then one the week of week one. And I wrote for USA Today, saying, hey, they might only win 6-7 games maybe, but they're going to be a fun 6-win team that isn't just going to roll over every week. This is a team, especially if Drake Maye comes into his own, which I told you, he's my favorite quarterback in this draft class, and I think he has the highest ceiling. But even if it doesn't come to fruition in year one, that's no reason to panic. As long as they see progression week by week, and it's evident that they have a dude in May, then that's all you can ask for in year one of this. But I like the way that they've gone about addressing their needs.
Your breakdown of what the Patriots could look like, a team that's still going to be fun, even if they only win 7 games.
Yeah,
it's pretty much year zero. I think fans understand the expectation shouldn't be set too high. But even going back to last season, this is a defense that has a lot of continuity from 2023 and had this team in almost every single one of their games. Obviously, the Cowboys game and the Saints game definitely got away from them. You could even say the Miami game where it was competitive before the fourth quarter, and then, things kind of went off the rails. But this is a defense that makes you think they're probably going to be in it in the fourth quarter going forward as well. If you can just get offense and special teams. Happens with me with my cat all the time. Don't worry. This is a very pet-friendly show. But this is a team where if the offense and special teams are just average or not offensive, or they're not actively hurting you with turnovers and negative plays and things like that, you could see them squeaking out some victories that maybe looking at the schedule, you might not expect from them. And I'm curious, because you are coming in from a Steelers perspective, you've seen Alex Van Pelt / Kevin Stefanski's offense plenty of times. Obviously hard to differentiate where obviously Stefanski started and where Van Pelt began and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, Van Pelt's a guy who's been in a lot of different systems. So you think he'd try to incorporate at least some of what we saw in Cleveland in New England. So what are your expectations for what we might see from the Patriots solely based on what you saw from him back in Cleveland?
Yeah, I think that it'll be some sort of balance between the F it, let it fly with Joe Flacco that we saw down the stretch. And a little bit of the Deshaun Watson where he has just look too weary in the offense, like where he doesn't want to take too many chances. There's got to be a happy medium there. In terms of the Flacco stuff, it's a little bit of a different mindset because Flacco's like, well, I'm near 40. I'm near the end of my career, and I've got this great defense that if I do make a mistake, they'll probably get the ball back from me anyway. But I do think that there is a sense of, hey, like, let's open this up a little bit. Let's be explosive because we have a quarterback who can help us do that. And in terms of the run game that we're going to see, I think that if you look at the Browns' success, they had a lot of success in running out of shotgun. So I think we're going to see a little bit more of that incorporated for New England. And look, it's going to be a more modern offense. Like, look, Patriots fans had to suffer through Joe Judge and Matt Patricia. And they brought Bill O'Brien back into the fold as well at some point. So I think bringing in Alex Van Pelt here, I think it is a more modern look at how to attack defenses in 2024 rather than giving the reins to a special teams coordinator and a defensive coordinator to call the offense. So I think that there's going to be a lot of good things to see here, and it's going to be, hey, we're going to attack you over the top. We're going to hit you with some ground game as well, but it's going to be more explosive than Patriots fans have been accustomed to. Where especially with like Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi, where it's just very just don't turn the ball over, short completions, little by little. And there's still going to be iterations of that. There's hints of West Coast in just about every offense in the league. But look, when you got a guy like Drake Maye, Van Pelt's going to let him fly. And if he makes mistakes, which he's going to do, he's a rookie, learn from him and keep refining that arm. And we saw a little bit with Jordan Love last year, where early on, there was some growing pains, but once he figured things out, he became one of the best quarterbacks in football. So with Maye, everybody talks about, the mechanics might be a little bit raw. Look, man, I will take a guy with raw talent who just needs a little bit of polishing over, a guy who comes into the league that everybody assumes is like, oh man, he's a very polished product. Like we've seen a handful of guys like that, especially in New England. Like Mac Jones is supposed to be like this quote unquote polished guy that, was ready to go, but has a very low ceiling. Maye has a higher ceiling, a big arm, and I think that they're going to look to take advantage of that.
Kind of to put a bow on this Alex Van Pelt conversation real quick, when he was fired from Cleveland, I heard some different things. There were reports that it was something that came from up top because the Browns are paying Deshaun Watson approximately $1 billion, I believe, according to Over the Cap. So they got a lot of money tied into a guy who's not very good. So there was some speculation that tied into it, where just Alex Van Pelt couldn't make him look any better, so they decided to move on. I also heard some things about sometimes the offense could be repetitive, a bit predictable. I feel like I think it was a pick six, or the interception that they had against the Texans was kind of the poster child for that, where you saw in the mic'd up segment, they knew the stick was coming. And looking at, Van Pelt's playbook, you can see in some of those empty formations, it's pretty obvious sometimes what's going to come. So from your perspective, did you think that there was a level of predictability where maybe that was something that hurt him? Or do you think maybe that was a bit overblown just in the speculation when it happened, considering it was a move that may have caught some people off guard?
I think that in terms of it being predictable, that more comes with the field of, hey, you got to remember, they didn't have Nick Chubb throughout, the entirety of last year. So they were going to lean a little bit more into the passing game when you don't have, one of the best running backs in football to turn to. So I think that might have been a little bit overblown. I think that this is more about the Browns than it is about Van Pelt, because again, the offense took off when Flacco took over, and this is a dude who they brought off the couch in week 12, 13, like late in the season, compared to a guy who's now been in the offense going on year 3. It just hasn't looked good. You gave him a bunch of guaranteed money to. And in that situation, when you're paying him that much money and you can't really get out of it, who are you going to let go? Are you going to let go of the quarterback who you're paying, the GDP of Cleveland to, or are you going to, let go of the offensive coordinator? So they had to make some sort of decision there. A lot of people were surprised when they let go of Van Pelt because of the success that they had with Flacco down the stretch. So I think that, any sort of issues with him were, I don't know if they were necessarily issues. I think the Browns just realized, okay, we can't let go of Deshaun Watson because, money wise, it would just kill us this season and forward. So I think that they were just kind of trapped between a rock and a hard place, had to make the decision. And again, when you're paying a quarterback that much money, you're not going to let him go until you can find a way out of it. So I think it was more of something they felt like, we're kind of trapped and have to make some sort of move, rather than like, okay, we want to move on from Van Pelt. But even then, like Kevin Stefanski, like he's kind of, the one running the offense per se. So it's not as big of a loss, but I do think that the Patriots will benefit from that in terms of, the Browns trash being the Patriots treasure.
From your lips to the football god's ears, friends. All right, we are going to move on from the Van Pelt conversation into the actual prospects. But first, quick word from our friends at Prize Picks. Be right back. Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks, as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball and hockey entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. I personally love Prize Picks because they're super easy to use, easy to navigate, and they offer injury insurance, so your entries stay live even if one of your players gets injured. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 fantasy sports app. Download the app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, now let's start with the 3rd overall pick in the draft, Drake Maye. I know Drake, Polk, and Baker are all guys you scouted. You got some notes. So let me know what you thought of Drake Maye as a prospect before we get into some of the speculation and how he might look in New England in year 1.
Yeah, and I told you last week, like, I'm not the biggest college football buff. Like, I start paying attention to these dudes, right around January when I go to Mobile for the Senior Bowl. But obviously, throughout September, you hear about the top quarterback prospects and whatnot, and that was Caleb Williams and Drake Maye for this year. And everything that I saw from Maye from January till now, a lot of people made the Herbert comp, and I can see why. In terms of just, how big his arm is, the ability where he just, he knows he can fit balls and just about anywhere he wants, phrasing. And I think that when it comes to his confidence in those types of situations, his ability to just let it fly and make things happen down the field, the Herbert stuff, I could see why people make that comparison. And again, the biggest knock against him was, some of the footwork stuff, some of the mechanical stuff, but I saw a video from I think it was OTAs. The Patriots started their OTAs, correct?
Yeah, yesterday. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so and he was mic'd up throughout it all, and just the little things, already how he is as a leader, that's definitely not nothing. And the way that he conducts himself with his teammates, already those are the types of qualities of a franchise quarterback, of a star quarterback. And so a lot of things when it comes to being, the face of a franchise, extend from being, on the field to off the field. And, so far from what little we've seen of him on the field with the Patriots is it seems that he has that. More athletic than, people would think. In today's NFL, though, and today's football, really, most quarterbacks are going to be a little bit athletic. It's not going to be, pure pocket passers like a Tom Brady who are just going to stand there, maneuver a little bit in the pocket, but he's going to get outside. He's going to, do some crazy throws and, be able to move in doing so. So when it comes to the prototypical 2024 NFL quarterback, if he reaches his full potential, I think that Drake Maye is a guy that you look at as, somebody you could build in a lab of, hey, that's kind of what you want in a guy. And if he, like I said, if he comes close to reaching his full potential, that's a guy that the Patriots can have, under center for, the next decade.
And you mentioned the video clips, and I thought those were really exciting because you kind of heard that Drake, I think when you look at the tape, you can tell this is a guy who's ahead of what you'd expect for a guy who's 21 years old and only started 2 seasons. The way he sees the field, the way he attacks coverages, how quickly when he's really on, he can get through his reads. It's pretty obvious that it's not like he's, processing too quickly because he doesn't understand. It's more like a repetition kind of thing.
Right.
And when he's talking to his receivers, he's talking about, come back to the ball, where he wants to miss, all the little details that you like to hear from any quarterback. And that open line of communication is what makes for great chemistry. But he's got a guy, Jacoby Brissett, who you watched, and as you know, is plenty capable of starting in an NFL season. He's not going to be a top 10 quarterback, but he's a guy who could, not lose you games and even probably win you a couple when he needs to. So with that being said, do you expect Drake Maye to actually play as a rookie? And if so, what do you think the timeline's going to be? Is it going to be a set date that they try to aim for, or is it really going to be more of a behind the scenes, let's see how this guy's developing?
I mean, I would think that they let him play as a rookie. It's much different in today's league than, it was 20 years ago when, the Bengals took Carson Palmer and he didn't play until the second year. We see some similarities to that where, the Chiefs didn't play Mahomes until the final game of his rookie year. And he took over and did well. Obviously, the Jordan Love situation in Green Bay. But more often than not, like, these guys are expected to play, if not right away, at some point during their rookie years. And, when you have guys come up in today's league where, there's a lot of 7-on-7s throughout high school and, the recruiting process through high school, like, it's so much different today than it used to be. So I think that guys today are more geared to start right away and more prepared to start right away. And if they want to start Brissett, week one and, wait a little bit till they feel 100% about Drake Maye, that's fine. That's probably smart. But I would assume that we see him at some point, man. Like, it's okay to look at a quarterback and let him learn on the job, let him make mistakes and learn from them, especially when you're a team where, you don't have, like, realistically, like, I don't think the Patriots have Super Bowl aspirations this season. So, like, if you're in that situation, like, hey, we're going to play Drake Maye week 4 and, like, look, man, we're going to give you the keys. We're not going to, give you a short leash or anything. We understand that, some things might take some time. But the talent is there. And I think that a few things that he just needs to be aware of is that, hey, take the layups when you can. Not every play is going to be a home run. And as long as you can do that, man, like, you're going to be chilling and your progression is going to come. Your natural talent will help you get to where we need you to be. So I would like to see him at some point just because, like, the talent potential is certainly there. But even if it's not week 1, it's not to say that we won't see him at all. But I do think that we'll see him.
I agree. I think, one, his supporting cast is a lot better than we saw at UNC. And that was kind of the example of what the Patriots even mentioned after they took him, that he wasn't surrounded by a ton of talent. Obviously, really good running back in Amari and Hampton, good tight ends. But when you're talking about the guys he was primarily throwing to, not a lot of great NFL talent there. So we know we could probably make it work, even if there are going to be growing pains. But one thing that I've kind of been mulling over is, what if Jacoby Brissett gets this team to around 500? Then they start poking their head above 500. And they're actually playing well going into maybe the bye week or even the last quarter of the season, which I don't think it's a coincidence that after the bye week, they immediately play the Bears and Caleb Williams. And then after that, like, 3-quarter mark, you see them play Josh Allen twice and Justin Herbert.
Yeah.
Like, the NFL schedule is very much geared towards Drake Maye probably starting in the second half. But if Jacoby Brissett is playing well, and then he actually has the team playing at a level where it's like, hey, they're competitive. You really don't know if they're going to win or lose every week because, it's kind of a coin flip based on who gets the ball last. Yeah. Do you think they still go to Drake Maye and say, hey, we've got to show, potential 2025 free agents what we've got waiting in the wings? Or do you think you stick with Brissett and do what's best for the entire football team?
Yeah, I think that's a good point made by you. Like, the NFL schedule makers were practically holding the Patriots gunpoint and be like, he's going to play. You better put him in because look at all these potential, quarterback matchups that we have in the back half of the year. I like Jacoby Brissett enough. I don't know if he's going to, have this team in a situation where they're, consistently, like you said, hovering around 500. I don't know. Like, Jacoby's a fine backup. I think that his value does get a little bit overstated in terms of, how good he really is. But the defense is going to be good and they're going to be in it so long as the offense protects the ball and is able to put up some semblance of points, which was, better than anybody, wasn't guaranteed last year by any means, especially there was a 3-game stretch where the defense allowed 13 or fewer points and they lost all of them, I think. So
I just disassociated. It's out of my brain. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Completely understandable. So I think that, like, to an extent, like, you can do far worse as a backup quarterback or a bridge quarterback than Jacoby Brissett, but I don't think that he's necessarily raising the ceiling of the team. And like you said, the potential matchups that they're going to have down the stretch, like, you're going to face a Caleb Williams, you're going to face a Josh Allen twice. You need a dude who has the ability to raise his level of game to meet, the potential raising of levels that those other guys have. So I see that potential in Drake Maye. I've said it before. He's my favorite quarterback in this draft class. I think he's going to end up being the best quarterback in this draft class. Not to say that Caleb Williams is going to be bad. I think he's going to be good. But something with Maye is, he has, that Josh Allen type factor where he's like, I believe in my arm so much, sometimes I might, throw into a tighter window than I should, and it might go the other way. But hey, other times it's going to get in that window and it's going to be a 70-yard touchdown. So you live by my arm, you die by my arm. And that's why I said, the thing about take the layups, because sometimes, if we're making the Allen comparison, sometimes Josh Allen doesn't take those layups and tries to, go for a dunk over 9 people where you're just not going to get it, dude. So as long as he's smart with the football and cautiously aggressive, I think that there's going to be some success with Maye. And again, I hope that we see him, and especially if we get those matchups that you just said, between Caleb Williams, between Josh Allen twice. The Patriots usually played the Bills strong anyway with whoever's at quarterback. So if you have a guy like Drake Maye who's starting to come into his own in those 2 matchups with the Bills in the final month of the season, maybe you steal one from Buffalo, maybe you steal both from Buffalo. Who knows? But those are matchups that I'm sure fans are licking their chops to see.
Yeah, and with Drake, especially when it comes to decision making, obviously there are times where he needs to rein it in, could be smarter. I could say that for pretty much any of these quarterbacks in this draft class, other than like Jaden Daniels. It's really the only guy where it's like you're kind of stunned when you actually see him throw into ugly windows. But with Maye, like 1.9% turnover-worthy play rate, that was one of the best in the country. That's you look at like a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes, they were putting the ball in harm's way a lot more often. And when you look at the big-time throws and the big-time throw rate, it's about similar. So the prospect of Drake Maye starting, you look at obviously the consistency, which is important, the accuracy. Like even in camp early on, we're seeing that as he gets the new footwork down and is trying to work on becoming better in that area, there is some poor ball placement when it comes to those underneath throws. But, I know like Clyde Christensen said, he kind of laughed when he was on the Pat McAfee show. And it was like, yeah, he'll miss the layups. But then he kind of scoffs and he's like, yeah, sure. But he's also going to make a bunch of throws that no one else is going to be able to make. Or like a lot of guys aren't even thinking about. So there's give and take. But I am cautiously optimistic about the idea of Drake Maye playing as a rookie. And with his mental toughness, I feel like if you do put him in there, it's not going to be a Mac Jones situation, which, to be fair, took a couple of years before Mac really started to regress and you started saying, like, whoa, the decision-making is off the rails on top of the poor mechanics. So you're hoping that the offense can support him whenever he goes in, and then it's more just a personal thing where he's learning what he can and can't do at the next level.
Yeah, and you pointed out the turnover-worthy throws, and that's why the cautiously aggressive thing. Like he knows to pick his spots, which is something that you love to see in a young quarterback. Where like, okay, could I maybe try to make this type of throw downfield and perhaps fit it in the window? Sure, but let's take this 8-yard game. Let's play for another down. Let's not live and die on one play. And I think that having that mindset is good. But like you said, as long as he can learn to hone in those underneath throws and not miss the layups, I think that's a good analogy that you had. We have another potential star AFC quarterback in the making, which there wasn't enough of those already apparently in the conference. So I think that he has the potential to be absolutely in the conversation for one of these top quarterbacks in the league.
Once again, I really hope the football gods listen to this podcast right now and we'll
Absolutely.
bring those to life. All right, we're going to move into the weapons that Drake Maye is going to be throwing to his fellow rookies. But first, quick word from our friends at Game Time. Be right back. With the NBA playoffs in full swing and the Celtics looking like the best team in the East, I'm trying to go to a game so I can witness their greatness in person. And to get those tickets, I'm going to be using Game Time, an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Buying tickets on Game Time is extremely easy. All you have to do is click on the team that you want to see, browse through the available options, then click on those games. Then you can go through filters like price, where you want your seat to be, all that good stuff. Click, get a panoramic view of the seat that you're going to buy, and it can be as easy as a one-click purchase for your ticket. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So after the Patriots took Drake Maye, Elliott Wolf said that they wanted to get him some weapons. They also mentioned offensive line, but this is about fun stuff, the thing that everybody can relate to. Everybody likes watching the pass catchers. So They went out and got Jalen Polk in the second round. Then in the fourth round, they went out and got Javon Baker, a couple of vertical threats, ball winners, really physical players who I think are going to do really well in this system and bring some much needed juice and really tenaciousness that I think the offense didn't really have, especially in recent seasons. What did you think about the additions of those two guys to New England's offense?
I loved it. They're both guys, you said, they're, downfield threats, but also guys who can make plays in the intermediate. With Polk, he's a guy who can be physical downfield. I'm just looking at the little bullet points I had. Good at ball tracking. So when you have we have a pair of guys like this who are going to grow together, but aren't one-trick ponies. Like, yes, when it comes to Javon Baker, he reminds me a lot of Gabe Davis a little bit in terms of his downfield ability to make plays. Another UCF guy, by the way. So I do see the similarities there in terms of just their ability to be home run hitters at the wide receiver position. I think Polk is more of the intermediate winner than Javon Baker would be. But that's good to have that type of balance where, if you lean on Baker as more of your burner and you're, 50-50 ball guy, Jalen Polk can do that as well. But again, another guy who can win underneath as well, as a more of a physical receiver. So they've kind of utilized, or at least they wanted to use Juju Smith-Schuster in kind of that underneath role where if he catches a 6-yard pass, he can try to turn it into an 11-yard gain. He did that a lot in Pittsburgh before he messed up, really just dealt with a lot of injuries over the past few seasons in Pittsburgh and Kansas City before coming over to New England. But if you have a guy in Jalen Polk who can, be that downfield threat, but also win in the intermediate and also be a little bit physical underneath, like that's a guy who, again, a master of none, but, a dude who can really give you everything that you need at each level. And that's great. And Javon Baker, like I said, more of the vertical threat, I would assume, in this offense, but still a guy who you can rely on to not be so much as a one-trick pony. That's a thing where, his ceiling to me is much higher than, someone like a Gabe Davis, because with Davis, it's like, okay, he's either going for like 6 catches and $140 and 2 touchdowns, or he's catching one pass for, for like 6 yards. And it's just not going to be a great day. So I think that he's a guy who, yes, he's going to be, the guy that Drake Maye says, F it, Javon's down there somewhere sometimes. But he's still a guy that you can rely on underneath and, in the intermediate as a route runner as well. So 2 guys who I think are going to be focal points of the offense for the foreseeable future with Drake Maye. I think it could be similar to a situation with Burrow, Chase, and Higgins in Cincinnati, where you've got a quarterback and you've got 2 young receivers who are going to grow together. And, we've seen how it's worked out for the Bengals. They've made it to consecutive AFC championship games. We're very close to making it to consecutive Super Bowls. And if that ends up panning out for the Patriots, they could have a nice trio for the next 5 years. We'll figure out the whole money side of things and who gets paid once we get there, 2028 or whatever that time will be. But I like the way that they went about it, not trying to necessarily make some sort of like massive splash in free agency. After like all these guys got franchise tagged as well, there wasn't too many splashes to be made. So, rather than overpaying for a Calvin Ridley, who I like Calvin Ridley, I wouldn't have given him a 4-year, $92 million contract like the Titans did. So, looking at that and say, okay, we're going to give Calvin Ridley a ton of money, or should we just draft a couple guys who we can grow in-house, who we believe in, and that can fit what we want Drake Maye to be as a quarterback? I think that they went the right route with it. And now potentially have 2 guys who can become, legit number 1, number 2 receivers in the offense with a quarterback who, they're all just going to be in the system, figuring it out together and growing together. And I think that was a really good way to go about it.
Completely agree. You also mentioned Juju earlier. He actually said yesterday, last year he was playing and he was never really above 60%. This year he's saying he's at 100%. So that's going to be a pretty interesting shakeup to the receiver room. Obviously, you want to keep you got Pop also, who's a guy that you figure is going to contribute heavily in 3 receiver sets, along with Polk and Baker. That's a really good young nucleus. But then with the veterans, if you have Juju, you got KJ Osborne who was signed, then Kendrick Bourne.
I forgot about KJ Osborne. Yeah. So, quietly they have especially if Polk and Baker pan out and show early on that they can be go-to guys. They got a deeper receiver room than people tend to realize, especially if Juju can be that veteran power slot guy. Awesome. If Pop Douglas can make plays from the slot, and they can move Pop on the perimeter as well, should they want to. They've got a nice collection of young talent and veteran talent. I love the addition of KJ Osborne, a guy who was, predominantly the 3rd receiver for the majority of his time in Minnesota, took a little bit of a step forward after Adam Thielen left, but was still that third option behind Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. I think that's a guy who you can put in the slot. You can put him on the perimeter. He's got that versatility. They quietly have a nice collection of weapons and went about it. Again, didn't give massive money to, a bigger name like Calvin Ridley and potentially overpay. Bring in a KJ Osborne, reliable veteran to help groom along two rookies. And I really enjoy what the potential of the offense of the Patriots can be, which is a hell of a lot more than we've been able to say since 2018, maybe 2019. It's been a while.
Yeah. Honest. That's why I love you, man. You set me up perfectly. All right. So you mentioned they have some pretty good depth in that receiver room, but now it comes down to, okay, when are these young guys going to play? Because the way I see it, if you're talking about this being a potential sneaky playoff contender, I think it comes down to Baker and Polk being guys who do have pretty significant roles and can give you the juice that maybe guys like Osborne and Kendrick Bourne, especially coming off the ACL, and Juju Smith-Schuster don't really give you. They're more like pure possession guys for the most part. So what are some realistic expectations for Polk and Baker in terms of role and potential output when it comes to this season?
I try to think back to like the 2019 rookie class when it comes to that, because that was the class of, I think it was Deontay Johnson, DK Metcalf, Brandon Ayuk. And you look at the numbers that each of them had, it was, about 55 to 65 catches, somewhere in that range. And each of them had really successful years. So I think that if you can get Jalen Polk and Javon Baker both above 50 receptions, especially Javon Baker, if he's, hovering around like the 700, 800 yard mark with, a few deep ball touchdowns, so a lot of red zone targets, especially, like if they are in that vicinity, I think that is a very good year one for both of them. And I try to think of it as, what's a good analogy? Kind of like a pizza, right? Where, if you have a pizza, and Jalen Polk is the cheese and Javon Baker's the pepperoni, you can have Juju Smith-Schuster, be some black olives. You can have KJ Osborne, be some onions if you like a supreme pizza. I'm a supreme guy, so stick with me. And occasionally, if you want to mix it up and maybe throw some Kendrick Bourne tomatoes on there for, whatever you got to do. It just depends on what your taste buds are feeling. As long as each of these guys can serve their role appropriately, then I like what the offense has potential to be. But yeah, I think that you're right. Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, I mean, where they were drafted and what the direction of the offense seems to be, I think that they are the ones that the offense will be revolving around in terms of the passing game, where Alex Van Pelt and Gerard Mayo would love if these are the two predominant guys that you're targeting. But again, you brought in KJ Osborne for a reason, to help the process along. You still have Juju there, a reliable veteran who, has worked with his fair share of elite quarterbacks and elite receiving talent. He knows what it's like to be, a 1B or number 2 opposite of an elite receiver. So there's a lot of good previous experience and a lot of just knowledge that can be passed on to these guys as well. And I think that, again, if they're, 55 to 65 catches a piece, I don't think either of them are going to, blow up the rookie year and be, 90 catches, just because the receiving room is, a little bit deeper than many would think on the surface. But if they can, be 55, 65, 70 catches, I think that that's a great start.
So I'm curious your perspective on what my projection is going to be for their roles in the offense, Alex Van Pelt's offense. So if we're looking at like the Browns of the past couple seasons, I feel like Javon Baker's like your Amari Cooper. Yeah. Honestly, like I did a breakdown, and when you look at their size and like their measurables, they're not super far off. Cooper's bigger and he's faster, but everything else is kind of in the same ballpark. And they're both guys you can put them one-on-one. They're separators. They can win downfield, be those ball winner type guys. Then in maybe that more like Donovan Peoples-Jones, Cedric Tillman role, I'm thinking that's Jalen Polk, where you ask him to do the dirty work in the run game, blocking, back at Washington, he's blocking like linebackers, defensive linemen, on top of safeties who are coming at him full speed. Yeah. So you figure he's going to be the guy who's really close to the formation most of the time, and then can get those, downfield targets in some obvious pass situations, win on those over routes. And then you got Pop Douglas as your Elijah Moore, who's the guy you can scheme touches for. And then he can also be explosive downfield if you need him to. A little bit of everything in the middle. Do you think I'm kind of in the ballpark? Again, because you watch a lot more Browns than I have.
I love the analogy. I love it a lot. And I think that, the more that we talk about this offense, like I think that people are going to be surprised at how like talented it is. That's not to say that it's going to be, a top 5 unit or anything, but if by like week 11, we're looking at, oh my goodness, the Patriots are like 13th, 12th in offense, who would have thought that they'd be, bounce back that well? Like it's very possible, especially if these guys come into their own, before the midway part of the season. So I do like that analogy a lot, and I think the usage is going to. I think the tight end usage is going to be interesting too, because the Browns love to utilize a bunch of tight ends, whereas David Njoku, Harrison Bryant. So I'm intrigued to see what it's going to look like from a tight end perspective as well. But they're going to have a respectable number of mouths to feed, and I'm intrigued to see how they're going to divvy up these targets, divvy up the touches. How often they're going to run 12 personnel, how often they're going to, go with more heavier sets. So it's going to be much less vanilla from the Patriots than we've seen. It's going to be, some strawberry, some cookie dough, some, a lot of different flavors that are going to be mixed in there.
You mentioned the tight ends. That's going to be an interesting one for sure, because you got Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper pretty much interchangeable. Like, they can play in line.
Insert white dude tight end here. Yes,
exactly. Yeah, like they're not going to blow you away, but they're guys who can move the chains, do just enough, and get in the way in the run game. The needle mover for me is Jaheim Bell, because when you look at how they used Harrison Bryant specifically as a blocker, where you move him around a lot, you kind of use him in some unconventional ways. He used like a ton of quarterback sneaks, different things like that. But Jaheim Bell being a guy who lined up all over the place, both of the schools he was at in college, I think you can project that, one, he's going to be used to the best of his ability, where he's a guy where you don't want to. He's versatile, but more in a way where you kind of have to, especially as a blocker, manage where you're going to put him.
Yeah.
But then with the explosiveness, like straight line speed, ball tracking downfield, when you look at the play action opportunities, the Browns love their tight end screens. That's where I feel like he'll probably get into the mix. But yeah, I feel like there's some sneaky pieces on this offense where it's going to be one of those situations where they're better than the sum of their parts, where everybody's going to kind of have their role. And like you said, it's going to be kind of like, well, cut here, cut there. And then you're looking at it, it's like, whoa, wait, they're actually doing a lot better than I expected.
Right.
When it's set manageable expectations, of course, we don't know what the offense is going to look like. They're still installing plays. We are talking about two rookies who, as pro-ready as they may be, are still going to have their lumps. But I like that you kind of brought some optimism, because I do think their ceiling is a little bit higher than people are giving them credit for.
I do too. And again, even if it's, they go 6-11, 7-10, I don't think there's going to be too many instances where we, go down their schedule and be like, oh man, the Patriots got rolled that week. Like, It might happen once or twice. It usually happens to teams at least once a year anyway, no matter how good you are. But I am curious, you brought up the tight end situation a little bit more. We're starting to see the league transition to a little bit more of a 12 personnel league. That's, kind of the pendulum swing here, where defenses are going to, counteract the passing game with, more nickel and dime sets. How do you counteract that as an offense? Oh, more 12 and 13 personnel. So if you look at, especially like on early downs last year, what team led the NFL in 13 personnel? The Chiefs did. So I think that, the good teams are starting to get ahead of this curve and be like, okay, how are we going to counteract, 5'9" defensive backs? I'm going to put another tight end on the field and, take them out of the equation. So I think that I'd have to go back and look at the Browns tight end usage of last year, just because now I'm curious to see how much that will translate over for the Patriots. And again, it would be a little bit different, because I think, David Njoku is better than Austin Hooper and Hunter Henry. But I still expect to see, a lot of carryover from what it was in Cleveland. So I'm excited to see what this Patriots offense looks like. And we know that we expect the defense to still be good, especially with, all the pieces that they are bringing back from a unit that was really good last year. I think that this can be a team that, we're talking about late on in the season, be like, okay, the Patriots aren't mathematically eliminated from the playoffs yet, and it's week 14. That's pretty neat.
That'd be a godsend, I think. And you mentioned the tight end usage. I know the Browns were one of the most 11 personnel heavy teams in the league, but they were diverse. Right now. Like, they were kind of like, I know they were middle of the pack in 12 personnel, but 13, they were way up there. They used a lot of 13, a lot of heavy formations, like with Nick Harris as a fullback and kind of moving him as an eligible receiver kind of thing. With all the offensive linemen they have, especially the young guys, if Caden Wallace isn't playing and it's Chuks Okorafor instead at that left tackle spot, I think that might create a situation where you see Caden Wallace maybe as like an extra tight end or a fullback, and you start giving defenses some weird looks that, to your point, you want those heavy sets. So you force defenses into tough situations where it's, do I stick with my nickel defense? Do we have enough depth at safety where, like the Patriots, I'm just going to play big nickel and I have the guys who can handle it? Do you go to base where you have guys that maybe aren't really playing all the time? Like, I know a couple of years ago, we saw that from the Bills defense. I forget who it was against, but it was a team that forced them into their base, and that like AJ Klein had to play, and he got picked apart because it was just play action. It's like, this is a guy who's mostly a special teamer for us. He doesn't really play a whole ton. Wait, were you unable to unearth anything? I'm curious.
Yes. So in terms of first down personnel, at least, the Browns were 4th in the league last year in 13 personnel. So the Chiefs led with 12%. Seahawks had 11%, Cardinals had 10. But the interesting note of this is like who they were tied with: the Jaguars and Falcons, both of which love tight end usage. Like Doug Peterson loves him some tight ends. Arthur Smith loves him some tight ends. So I think that we're going to see some of that carryover with Alex Van Pelt, where we're going to see, okay, how am I going to use Jaheim Bell? How am I going to use Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper? So I expect, especially on first and second down, if they can live in like 12-13 to set up some like 2nd and 2 and say, all right, Drake, play action, look for Javon. We're going to see what we can do here. I'm excited to see how well this works out for the Patriots.
Hopefully Jalen Polk can basically be like an extra tight end kind of presence, like kind of a Puka or Cooper Kupp, where
that's a good
he's just so physical. It's like, it's technically 11 personnel, but he's going to be blocking your linebacker, so you can't just treat it necessarily like it's a pure passing personnel group.
I don't know how many of your viewers are wrestling fans, but allow me to make a wrestling comp for Jalen Polk. He's like, as a receiver, I feel like he's like Claudio Castagnoli. If you're a WWE fan, that's Cesaro, formerly known as in WWE, where he's just this big mother effer who his finishers, he throws a guy up in the air and gives him an uppercut. It's rad. But that's what I picture, physical receivers like Puka as, who aren't afraid to get down and dirty and run block, who aren't afraid to just really throw their weight around. If Jalen Polk can be like that, man, like that's going to be, especially on perimeter runs, like, if you're running behind a receiver like Jalen Polk, that could be very, very good.
Oh, old man Mob says that's a great comparison. You hit the nail on the head. All right, buddy. Last thing I'm going to hit you with. This is a bit off script, but Chuks Okorafor, I feel like I got to ask you about it, because we're having the debate. We talked to him yesterday, actually, switching from the right side to the left side, where he did play in college, but that was obviously a long time ago. He did say, Caden Wallace seemed like he was pretty confident switching from right to left, but Okorafor gave the more veteran response, where he was like, hey, it's a transition. It's a new position. I'm in a new city. I'm learning a new offense. It's a work in progress, but you do hope that he can kind of get back to those college roots and be able to kind of get the muscle memory down, especially with a guy like Scott Peters, who's so good with technique. Since you watch so much of Chuks, let people know what kind of player they're getting in him and what the expectation should be for him this season.
Yeah, and I think that people also need to understand is like, this isn't Madden where you can just move guys around the offensive line and keep their same overall and be like, it's the same thing. You're just shoving dudes. Like, no, like he's going to have to now transition from, moving his feet this way, moving his body this way, to now really just learning, really flipping it. So now in terms of how he played in Pittsburgh as a right tackle, wasn't a lead or anything, but was reliable. Had some differences with the organization middle of the year last year. What those were, I don't know the specificities of it, but there was some clear tension within the room where, he wasn't a fan of what the offense was doing, where the direction was going. And so they ultimately pulled him, and that's how Broderick Jones became the starter at right tackle. It was dumb because Chuks is very much clearly better than Dan Moore, who was their left tackle last year. So they could have just either put Broderick Jones in at left tackle and kept Chuks at right, or moved Chuks to left and see how that would have worked out. But you're getting a solid tackle, a very capable starting tackle. And look, understandable why it would be a transition, going from right to left. But he's a veteran guy who has been a starter in this league now. This will be year 4 or 5 of him being a starter. So, a veteran starter on the offensive line. For a Patriots offensive line who, you can correct me if I'm wrong, just from an outside looking in, was not good a season ago. I think that having him, and even if he doesn't start off the year, if he's more of like that swing tackle role until they feel comfortable inserting him into the lineup, depending on how you said it was a Caden Wallace that was going to be. So I think that as long as they're patient with it, we still have, OTAs, we still have mini camp, we still have training camp to go. Like, I think that he will be fine. And if something happens where, a right tackle goes down with injury, that's a guy you can look at Chuck and say, hey, we're going to put you right there. We'll move around the offensive line a little bit. We see teams have to kind of rearrange their offensive lines throughout the year because of injury. Obviously, you don't hope that happens, but if they do, they have a guy that they know played right tackle. They can put him there if need be. But, again, a veteran guy, a good player. Again, not elite, not one of the top echelon tackles in the league, but a solid starter in the league who will, give them an upgrade over what they had last year.
If he's just like a solid bridge guy who can kind of fend off Caden Wallace, keep him on the bench, let him develop behind the scenes.
Sure.
Obviously an older prospect, but still, this is a guy on a rookie contract, so there's much worse situations. I feel like best case scenario is Chuks plays so well, you're like, hey, we don't really need anybody else to mess this up. We're going to stick with this combination. And hopefully, the Patriots, I think, were near the top of the league in offensive line combinations last year. Don't want a repeat of that, but at least you have a guy who gives you the flexibility. Jarrett, This was a blast, man. Thank you so much. We got to have you back on. But for now, please let the people know where they can find you and what great stuff you got coming down the pipeline that we should be looking out for.
Yeah, appreciate it, buddy. Follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at JBaileyNFL. I did my write-ups for my version 1.0 of the game-by-game standings pick, so that's over at Touchdown Wire for USA Today. I did a piece on Trevor Lawrence as well, and how like this whole overstated like he's bad is just really dumb. And so I did like a big breakdown of Trevor Lawrence last year, so that's up on USA Today as well. And yeah, Steelers coverage at Behind the Steel Curtain. I'm the deputy editor over there for SB Nation. Their dedicated coverage to the Steelers. And then the pump fake, you can go listen to the AFC East preview that I did with Taylor here. That was last week. That is up on the channel, or you can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. I just did the NFC East preview yesterday with Jess Navarez of DallasCowboys.com. So a lot of stuff that you can listen to. Again, that's the pump fake with Jarrett Bailey, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe to my YouTube, where I stream all the shows at J Bailey NFL on YouTube. So doing a lot. We're inching closer to football being like back, and I think with OTAs and everything, you're gonna we're starting to be in the building. We're starting to see these guys in some semblance of a uniform. Like we're getting closer. So very excited.
Football's almost back, baby. Thank you so much again, buddy. It was a great time. And thank you all, as always, for watching. Make sure to keep it locked in at 5 o'clock. I've got Ted Nguyen coming on the show to talk about Mike McDaniel's innovative new defensive scheme and how I say Mike McDaniel, Mike McDonald. We got too many mix. Mike McDonald's innovative defensive scheme, which the Patriots are going to be seeing a lot of this season, and how it could affect both Patriots scheme and the NFL overall. So keep it locked on for that. But for now, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We will see you next time. Peace, y'all.